I'm Diane Hopkins with the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. Several of you I know, several are new acquaintances, so we're glad to have you all here for the Partnership's 7th Annual Media Symposium. We do this program specifically for you as reporters, media representatives, to give you sort of a heads up on the issues that we'll be facing as we move into the current legislative session. So we're going to begin the program with a formal welcome from GPB. Yvette Cook is here, and Yvette is Vice President for Development and Chief Strategy Officer. So Yvette.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, good morning to all of you. Good morning. And welcome to be, I'm very, very glad you're here. I'm just curious, how many of you have been here before in the building? Okay, that's a pretty good amount. Well, welcome back to those of you who have been here before, and welcome to those of you that are here for the first time. I often say that I think we're one of the best kept secrets in the city for a lot of different reasons, and this morning I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about who we are and what we do, and how education is extremely important to the mission of Georgia Public Broadcasting and GPB Media, as we call ourselves. Many of you may know, and some of you may not know, but we really, when we think of education, it really falls into two categories for us here. There are the children that we serve, and then there are the educators that we serve. On the children's side, we have a very robust website that has many interactive games. We have curriculum specifically geared around STEM. We have chemistry curriculum. We have a lot of literacy education, but right now one of the main focuses that we have throughout the website for children really is around STEM and STEM education, STEM initiatives. And then we of course have the PBS Kids, and some of you may be familiar with that. Again, it's an interactive opportunity for children. Really, the core ages are from 2 up until around 8 or 9 years old, even though we know that occasionally we have some older children playing around with that. And then we have the on-air portion, which people generally think about first, and that's Sesame Street and Sid the Science Kid and all the other program that we offer. And the wonderful thing about that is we offer over 3,000 commercial-free hours annually of children's programming. So we're pretty proud of that. And also Monday through Friday we offer 12 hours worth, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. You know that your children can have a safe haven for their television viewing. And then on the other side we have the educators. We educate, or we provide educational resources through our digital library to about 80,000, a little over 80,000 teachers across the entire state of Georgia. We have a partnership with Discovery, and that's how we're able to do that. And we also receive some of that information from PBS as well. So we have the educational perspective for our teachers, and we also are very involved in Common Core curriculum training. We do that right here at our studios live, and we have managed to have it so that it's interactive. All the teachers are able to learn about the Common Core standards at the same time. They're able to ask real-time questions, that kind of thing. And then there are 2 other initiatives I want to tell you about really quickly. One of them is called Fast Forward, and this is a project that we originated and took on here, and it's a way for us to talk to children, specifically high school, junior high age and above, about the importance of being ready for certain career paths that do involve STEM curriculum and get them excited about it. So we've done a lot of research and work closely with children so that we can talk to them in terms that they really understand and hopefully get excited enough about these careers that they take the classes and take the path that they need to take in high school so that they're prepared for that. We just received our 2nd year of funding for Fast Forward, so we're really excited about that. These are webisodes, and all of these things I'm talking about you can access from our website. And then there is the digital book that we're working on. We're working on the first digital classroom book in history meaning history, the curriculum of history for the state of Georgia. So as opposed to, the children, in the school districts buying the flat book, they'll actually be buying this digital book from us for history. And that's going to actually roll out this spring as far as the beta test is concerned. So we're really excited about that. So those are just a few of the initiatives that we have working on right now. One other one I'm going to mention to you is Stop the Drop, which is all around the American Graduate Program. And we've really interacted and interfaced with children, kids in high school, to get them to produce some of these webisodes about how important it is to stay in school and why you should. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing here at Georgia Public Broadcasting. I want to thank you for this partnership today. We're very excited about this, and I know you have a wonderful day in front of you. And I just want to ask you to do two things. Number one, to please utilize our resources and encourage others to utilize our resources. And then secondarily, if you're a supporter, thank you. And if you're not, keep supporting us, because that's how we're able to provide these resources. So again, thank you so much for allowing me to welcome you. We're very, very glad to have you here at our studios, and I know you're in for a wonderful day, so enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Georgia Public Broadcasting has been our host for this session from its inception, so we really do appreciate your partnering with us. If you're not familiar with the Georgia Partnership, we are a nonprofit organization that's been in existence now for over 20 years, and we work to inform education stakeholders like you folks and a lot of others on best practices and policies that we think improve education, not that we think that have been proven to improve education and drive the improvement in student achievement across the state. So we hope that you'll use us as a resource as well. In addition to the folks at the tables here, we have a few additional guests around the perimeter of the room. And you may see some familiar faces. The partnership staff, of course, is here, and several of our speakers are here already. And you'll also see a couple of members of our board of directors as well. Okay, we're going to launch into today's program. You have the packet of information in front of you. The agenda for today, the morning session, I'm not going to go through each line item for the morning session, but we'll let you know that we'll take a break sort of mid-morning. We'll see how the speakers are going and try to line up a break with that. But feel free at any point, if you need to stand up and stretch, we've got refreshments in the back room, lots of caffeine, coffee, juices, and snacks as well. We'll run until about 12:10, and then we'll take a break for lunch. And again, lunch will be just behind this room. And we want to give you at that time a chance to network with each other. We'll hear from the Department of Education during that time as well. And then we'll resume the program again a little after 1 o'clock, and we'll hear from a couple of our representatives from the Go Dome and get sort of a heads up on what we're going to see in the next legislative session. So you see the agenda. Behind that are the biographical sketches of our speakers. We're not going to go into a lengthy introduction of them, but you'll see, you can read through those at your leisure. Behind that, press release that Bill Maddox will be covering with you, and the yellow sheet is the evaluation sheet. We really work at trying to make this the best session possible for you folks, so please take the time to fill it out and leave it on the table as we go through. And it always helps us if we have the updated contact information for you. We come out with regular reports. We want to make sure that you get those as well. And then the Partnership's Policy Toolbox, if you're not familiar with this online policy resource, please pay attention to the website address there. Go visit us there. We do regular updates, synopsis of some key education policy issues. We add to that on a regular basis, so you'll get the most current information to be useful for you. And then, of course, the top 10 issues to watch that we're going to actually go into in just a few short minutes and cover some of those top 10 issues for 2013. At this time, I'll introduce Bill Maddox, our Communications Director for the Partnership, who has a few more bits of information to give you.
Thank you, Diane. Good to see everybody again. This is an exciting event for us. You know, this is our 7th year. Just gets better and better, I think. So, you know, many of you I will call or drop a note and say, what do you want to hear? Who do you want to hear from? So we really try to construct this for you. And as you look at the agenda there, these are the things you ask for, not the things we want to force feed you. But I think at the end of the day, at least hopefully at the end of the day, you'll say it was very well worth your time. We know how valuable that time is. We want to be a source for you during the years. I have a couple of the best knowledgeable educators in the state, and Steve Dollinger and Dana Rickman. So please, during the year, if you have a question, if you just want to talk through something, call. That's fine with us. We want to hear from you. I'd like to introduce a couple people here who may be good resources for you during the year as you work on a variety of stories. We have 3 Alliance Education Agency head communicators here. Quickly, Tracy Ireland. Tracy, there's Tracy in the back. Tracy's Vice President with the Georgia Student Finance Commission. Dory Nolt. Most of you know Dory back there now as a Assistant Communications Director at DOE. She was sitting on your side of the table not too long ago as AP Education Reporter. We also have Reg Griffin. Where's Reg? Many of you know Reg Griffin. Reg is the Chief Communications Officer for Bright from the Start, Department of Early Care and Learning. So as you get a chance, you know, touch base with them so you know who to call during the year. John Rogers is here. John in the back with Department of Education. You know, we're going to talk a little bit about Race to the Top in just a few minutes. But if you have questions during the year, you want some clarification on Race to the Top, John's going to be the first guy that you're going to want to talk to. One of our presenters is here, but I want to single her out so you know who she is. Most of you know, but you may want to talk to her as the program progresses. That's Lauren Ekman. Lauren is in the back. Lauren is our 2013 Georgia Teacher of the Year. So she's got some really good teacher insights if you want to talk to Lauren. Just quick ground rules. Everything is on the record unless a presenter asks for it not to be, if you consent to that. But it's on the record. We have Q&A time built into the program, but if you don't get your questions answered, we ask as the program moves along to move out in the hall and continue your discussion. We are videotaping the session. Sierra Roberts is over here. Sierra is a student with Chattahoochee Technical College here for Brian Ray Communications. So that should be available Monday, Tuesday, and I'll send a note out to everybody once we get that up there. One of your members suggested social media. If you want to share things during the symposium, hashtag Media Symposium, you can go there and get some insight going as that as well. We've traditionally started the symposium with looking at the top 10. This thing has gotten bigger and better. We distributed about 4,000 copies last year, several thousand downloads off the website. So it's gained in popularity. It's a wonderful resource item. We ask you to consider getting it out to your audiences to let them know that it is available free of charge, up to 2. It will be on the website this afternoon. So please, if you can, get that out there. The press release in your packet for the top 10, and also on the website in the media room is an electronic version if you want to access that. Talking about the top 10, just kind of a joke between Dana and myself. I asked her, is there anything you wanted me to say about the top 10 and introducing it? And she laughingly said, well, it kind of ate into my party time in November because she was writing, analyzing, reading, publishing, and everything else. So it's a monumental effort. I think when you get a chance to look at it, you will agree that it's a really good product. Dana's going to look at only a couple of those items on the list, but many others will be covered as we go through the session, and Dana will speak to that. The last thing it says, yes, I am a Tennessee volunteer. People are probably, why an orange tie? Go Vols. Okay. With that, Dana Rickman, quick, get over here.
Thank you, Bill, and good morning. I'm Dana Rickman. I am the Policy Director for the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education, and it is my honor and my privilege this morning to bring to you this year's edition of the Top 10 Issues to Watch. As Bill said, it ate into my social life in November as we were writing this, but I was thrilled to do it, and I'm really happy with the product that we have, and I hope that you all find it helpful. For those of you who may be new to the Top 10, this is our 9th edition. We started publishing the Top 10 in 2005, and what we do with the Top 10, it is a list of critical issues really designed from a research-based, nonpartisan perspective and an analysis of the critical issues that we feel are going to affect our students and schools, especially throughout this year. As we compile the list in the fall of this previous year, we really look at research, what's currently trending in research, both at the national level and at the state level. We also look at what are some of the legislative priorities from either the previous session, what was something that was really contentious that we know is going to bleed into this year, what are some of the pre-filed bills, but also we look at what are some of the major initiatives that are going on in the state, the implementation of Common Core, for example, and things that DOE, right from the start, higher ed are rolling out and really working on. Also, too, we look for issues that we think are really affecting public education, but maybe aren't getting a lot of attention. And so we try to raise up and really shine a light on maybe one or two issues that we feel should get more attention from either legislatures or people on the regulation side. And so in the publication, they are numbered 1 through 10, but that's not a priority list. In fact, I like to think all 10 of them are a #1 priority for our state. As I was designing this slide and going through, I got real excited. I said, oh, I'll do the big reveal one by one. And then standing here, I realized you all have the list in front of you. So this is much more, a little more anticlimactic than I was hoping for, but I'm going to do just a very brief overview of all the 10. And when Bill sent out his request of who did you all want to hear from today to talk about the issues, not one of you said you wanted to hear from me. So most of these issues will be covered by the people that you really do want to hear from. So today I'm just going to do a quick overview, and then I'm going to dive deeply into 2 of the issues that may not get talked about today. But the first issue, race to the top, looking forward, looking back. We're about halfway through implementing our Race to the Top grant, and so this issue really provides a very high-level cursory overview of where we are with each of the Race to the Top elements and where we want to go as a state as we finish out our Race to the Top grant. Related to that, actually, is issue number 2, elevating low-performing schools, keys to a successful turnaround. Turning around low-performing schools is one of the goals of our Race to the Top grant, and so this issue really looks at what does it take to be successful. And one of the things that we think it really takes is high-performing teachers and leaders. And so it takes a little bit of a look at the teacher-leader evaluation system and what the state is doing to support those teachers, especially in those turnaround schools. Issue number 3, funding. How do we pay for K-12 education? I don't know is the answer to that question. But there is actually a lot going on in funding right now. We have the State Finance Commission that is making their final recommendations. They worked for about 18 months on how to revise the funding formula. Herb Garrett will be here later this morning to really go into details on that, about the funding formula. Help wanted, hiring 250,000 new graduates. I think by now we've all heard the data that in the coming years, 60% of all jobs will require some sort of post-secondary degree, and currently in Georgia, only about 42% of our working population has that degree, and so that difference is 250,000 new graduates. And so this issue is really looking at what is the state doing to up the graduation rates for certificates, 2 years degree, 4-year degrees. How do we get kids more college and career ready? Our 5th issue is early learning, ensuring high quality for our youngest learners. Georgia has always been on the forefront of pre-K education. They've been a national leader with our pre-K program that is, as you all know, is funded by the lottery and focuses on 4-year-olds. What Georgia also is doing is really looking at, and what this issue really focuses on, is the need for high-quality learning for the 0 to 3 population as well. We've all heard the statistics about the return on investment, 1 to 7, 1 to 10, 1 to 4, but those kinds of high-dollar investments really depend on high quality for our youngest kids. Right from the start, Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning is rolling out a new program called Quality Rated, which is really focused on providing incentives and programs to improve the early learning care centers that we have in the state. Our 6th issue is STEM, promoting science, technology, engineering, and math. As a workforce development priority and as a personal earnings priority, I think we've all heard the statistics around STEM jobs these days. For every 1 STEM graduate, there are 2 waiting jobs for them to choose from. For every 1 non-STEM job, there are 4.5 non-STEM people competing for that 1 job. STEM is one of the fastest growing job fields in the state and in the nation. And so what is Georgia doing in public education to really promote STEM learning? The waiver to No Child Left Behind. What grade did your school get? We're no longer operating under No Child Left Behind. AYP no longer applies. This issue number 7 is one that I'm going to talk about in detail in a moment. Technology, the next generation of learning. This issue really dives into how is technology being used in the classroom but across education to really change how students learn. Flexibility and choice, the issues. There are many. This issue goes into many of those issues around accountability, transparency, amongst a number of choice issues, both in terms of charter schools, which is the most popular one that we think about, but there's a lot of flexibility going on at the district level now as well, between becoming charter districts, the IE squared districts, things of that nature, and so this issue really delves into all of that. And the final issue are demographics, the changing face of Georgia's public schools. There has been a tremendous demographic shift, especially over the last decade, within Georgia and across the entire country. And so for all of these reforms to be successful and for education to continue to improve from birth through work, we really need to pay attention to these demographic shifts. And this is the demographics is the second issue that I'm going to talk about in detail. But before I do that, before I dive into the issues, I want to take a brief look at where Georgia is today in terms of educational attainment. If you look at pages 2 and 3 of your book, you'll see the 10 indicators for success. We like to track these indicators over time, and they really compare where Georgia is on measures from birth all the way through work and how we compare to the rest of the nation. And we really think that focused attention on a lot of these critical issues that we highlight today will help move Georgia on that line, along those lines. You know, I'm a researcher and a data nerd at heart, and so I could talk all day about each of those 10. I will not do that to you. So what I did instead is I put together a summary slide in my very clever coding that a green check means over time we're doing better. And so on about half of these measures, we're continuing to make improvement. The yellow equal signs means that we're holding steady. Probably means we need to keep getting better though, but at the very least we're not getting worse. The one that concerns me the greatest, though, is the giant red X, children in poverty, which is one of the reasons why I put it on our critical issues list for this year. Children in poverty, we've seen a large increase of percentage of children living in poverty, and it's a vicious cycle for a state like Georgia. The way out of poverty is economic development. The key to economic development is a strong educational system. Children in poverty undermine a strong educational system. It's harder to get the good outcomes. And so we need to break this cycle. And so that's one of the reasons why we focused on it today. All right. Issue 7. Are there any questions so far? Feel free to.
I just have a question.
Yes.
On the poverty slide. A lot of that is based on how poverty is calculated. So when you calculate poverty to include more kids, I mean, the school that I went to, we doubled because we changed what was considered poverty. So do you factor in the fact that when you change the definition, you change the numbers?
Right, and this is based on the federal poverty rate, not free reduced lunch or different state measures of that. And so this would be a consistent measure in how we compare to other states. No, it's not free and reduced lunch. This particular measure is on the federal poverty rate. Yes.
Can you just quickly address how the low birth weight babies category fits into the whole picture?
A very large predictor of academic success is premature births. That you can, I'm looking for the word, a lot of developmental delays, cognitive delays, things of that nature, behavioral delays can be rooted in premature births. And so children who are born early start at a deficit. So they're already starting behind. And a lot of premature births, certainly not all of them, but a large percentage of them, have to do with appropriate prenatal care. And so one of the things that I would say that would be an incredible, people always ask me, what's the one thing that you would do to raise the graduation rate? I would say start with pregnant mothers and make sure you get a healthy birth, on-time birth. Now, of course, you can't do that 100% of the time, but it really does affect the development of the children. And so that's why we include it. Other questions? All right. The waiver. Many of you, I'm sure most of you know that the federal law of No Child Left Behind used annual yearly progress as a report. And so schools either made or didn't make their annual targets of how they were performing. And so they were either succeeding schools or they were failing schools. This was a federal law that was due to be reauthorized in 2007. Congress has still not reauthorized it. And there are many constraints, and a lot of schools and districts and states were really struggling to continue to implement No Child Left Behind. So as a temporary fix until No Child Left Behind can be reauthorized, the U.S. Department of Education issued waivers that states could apply for to get out of certain restrictions under No Child Left Behind. Georgia applied and received a waiver under about the first round of states that got a waiver. Currently, 33 states across the nation have a waiver, and there's 7 more in the pipeline. To receive a waiver from No Child Left Behind, states had to qualify under 3 categories. They had to have college and career-ready performance standards and assessments. They had to develop a differentiated accountability system, and they had to implement a new teacher and leader evaluation system. Now in Georgia, the first and the third we were already doing under Race to the Top. We were implementing Common Core. We were developing a new teacher leader evaluation system. The Georgia Department of Education was in the process of developing a new differentiated assessment system called College and Career Ready Performance Index. And I'll get to the details of that in a minute. So we were approved for our waiver. And so no longer are we reporting to AYP, no longer are we subject to the performance requirements of No Child Left Behind and the proficiency goals. The 3 main tenets of our waiver, I think I have a pointer. The first is the proficiency goals. Under AYP, I think most of you probably know, the proficiency goal was that all students would be proficient, 100% of students would be proficient by 2014. We are no longer under that. Our new proficiency goal is that the state will reduce the number of non-proficient students within 6 years. So that's a state goal for us. There are also performance categories. There are 4 performance categories for schools. The first 3 apply only to Title I schools. The first one is a reward school. A Title I school can be categorized a reward school in one of 2 ways. The first way is that they be a high-performing school, meaning that they are in the top 5% of Title I schools and are showing significant gains. They are just a high-performer school. The second way is that if in their top 10% of Title I schools and have shown the greatest gains amongst their cohort, either one of those ways they can be a reward school. So we're really looking at the top tier of Title I schools if they are qualified as a reward school. The second category is priority. Priority is also only Title I schools. Schools can be called a priority school if they are in the bottom 5% of all Title I schools, and they have meet one of the following three conditions. Their graduation rate is below 60%. They've shown a lack of progress over the past 3 years on their achievement measures, or they have received a school improvement grant. A focus school is also applied to only Title I schools, and to be qualified as a focus school or categorized as a focus school, they have to be in the bottom 10%, again, of all Title I schools, and one of the following three conditions: graduation rate below 60%, or they have the largest in-school gaps between their highest performing and their lowest performing. So they're really looking at schools that have large achievement gaps between their subgroups. The last performance category is called an alert school. The alert schools is the only category that is all schools combined, Title I and non-Title I schools. And for an alert school, it's calculated by math. And so if any of the measures, either graduation rate or achievement rates between subgroups or on specific tests, science, language arts, math, if those averages are very different, are lower than the state average, you're an alert school. And let me give you an example of that. What they think of as very different or significantly lower is 3 standard deviations. And so how that works is, for example, our graduation rate for Hispanic students, subgroup categories, approximately 60%. If you're a school that has your Hispanic graduation rate 3 standard deviations below 60%, you would be flagged as an alert school. These schools have already been identified, and you can find a list on the Department of Education website. So that's the second category of the waiver. We have proficiency goals, we have performance categories. The third category is even more complicated, and we'll walk through it together, is the Accountability Index, the College and Career Ready Performance Index. Now, I know you can't read this. It's on page 32 of your booklet, if you really want to get a look at it. But the College and Career Ready Performance Index ultimately creates a score, a single score of 0 to 100 for a school and to a district. And I want to show you how they get to that score. They start with the index, and here is an example for the index for the high school. And it's created of 3 categories. One, you have content mastery, which in high school is the end of course test, the percentage of students meeting or exceeding their end of course test. In elementary and middle schools, this would be the CRCT test. The second category is post-high school readiness. And so that really gets at all the different things that happen in school that would get kids ready for college and or career. Are they foreign language? Are they taking, are they doing well on their ACT or their SAT? They're graduating in world language courses, things of that nature. In the middle school and elementary school, it's also called performance readiness, and it's really looking at percent of disabled students who are moved into general education classes, things of that nature. The third category for high school is the graduation rate, and it is going to be, it's on the new cohort calculation, but it is the 5-year graduation rate, not the 4. And so they will get 5 years. All of these scores are added up. Now, the scores from the previous list are calculated into 3 different scores. The first is the achievement score, and that is just the score of the calculation of all those indicators that we just had added up together based on current year data. The second score is called the progress score, and that's the state assessment part of the index, and it compares this year's scores to last year's scores. So you're really looking at a growth. How much have they learned since last year? The third score is the achievement gap closure score, again based on current year data, and it's looking at how well the highest performing subgroup of kids are compared to the lowest performing. So if you're bringing up your lowest performing kids. The fourth category is called exceeding the bar score, or what used to be called, I think some of you might be familiar with it, factors for success. These are things that schools can do in addition to get bonus points on their CCRPI. And they would be things like offering AP Physics, if they're a state STEM certified school. Those are examples of how you can get basically extra credit. These 4 scores are taken together, and give it an overall CCRPI score. And again, that score will be a 0 to 100. And so this is replacing AYP. This is what we'll see instead of seeing needs improvement or exceeds, all that sort of stuff. Now it's also, yes?
Hey, Dana, so what does each of those count?
Good question. Someone from DOE? They are currently, from what I understand, they're currently working on the weighting scheme. And so that's why we haven't seen the final, from what I understand, these scores will be released sometime in the spring, early spring, and they're working on how much to weight each of these. From what I understand, the achievement score will probably weight the most, but I don't know what the 50%, 60, 30, that's still what's being worked on by the Department of Education.
And is this all K-12 schools, or is this just high school?
It's all K-12.
Okay, my second question is, this is the first year this is going into place, so what are you going to use? Do you have information from last year? Because some of these measures were not in place. They weren't available last year.
Right, and so they're being put into place this year, and the schools are going to be hold harmless for at least a year while they sort all of this out. And one of the things that's important too is that our waiver was considered a provisional waiver, and that does not mean it's a temporary waiver or it's being tested, but what it means is that we're allowed to make adjustments to this. That this is, to call it a pilot phase as they roll it out, since they hadn't worked out the weights yet, as they figure out what works, what doesn't work, are these the exact right measures? So under our waiver, we're allowed to make minor changes to this. And so that's the only reason why it's provisional and not permanent. And that actually gives the state a lot more flexibility, which I think is a good thing.
So did these come down from the feds? Or is this what the state is implementing in order to meet the federal requirements?
Yes, this is what the state, and this was developed by our state. It was not developed by the feds. And so,
so complicated. I mean, for parents to understand.
Well, it is really complicated, but there's reasons for that, and I think that there's actually, I mean, it is very complicated. But what they were trying to do is really get away, and there are people from DOE who will address that, I'm sure, but they really wanted to get away from just good school, bad school. Pass, fail, and to really use this as a learning tool for the schools and for the districts. And so a school can look at this and say, you know what, we're doing great on English language arts and science. Our kids are scoring out of the park, but we're really suffering on social studies. And so they can use their professional development, they can use their money to really target where they need to beef up, and then they can really celebrate and look at what they're doing really well, and they can look across their district and across other districts and say, you know, you guys are really doing great at, you know, completing CTAE focus, they're doing great on that measure. What are you doing? Can we learn from that? And so there's a reason it's this detailed, is to use it for information and continuous improvement instead of just accountability of you did great or you did bad. And so that's why it's so discreet.
Dana, can I jump in really quick?
Please.
Sorry, I'm itching back here. Okay, so it is really complicated. I don't even understand every single facet of it because it's constantly and fluidly changing. The good thing about this is, Nori, to answer your question, we're going to boil it down into easy to understand scores for parents and the public. So we're not going to give you all of that and go figure it out. You know, we're going to have scoring that you'll be able to understand with stars and flags and grades and that kind of thing. So don't worry about that. And we are working on the weighting. But the idea is that it's not just a test. A test score does not determine how a child is doing in school or how a teacher is doing in her class, his or her classroom. We really need to look at the total picture of schooling to get an idea of how schools are actually doing.
Thank you.
And so you'll get a 0 to 100 score. And what you'll also get are these two things on the end, which I think would be very informative to parents. And they are not part of the rating score, but it's additional information. The first is financial efficiency rating, and it really looks at how well the school spending is tied to student outcomes. So are they spending it on the right thing? Are they being efficient with their dollars? The second one, I believe, is going to be based on survey data, but it's the school climate rating, and look at the behavioral and climate of the school. So you can get a school if kids are happy to be there and all that kind of thing. Yes, question back.
I mean, with the discussion of developing this, is there any concern about an overall score? I know you're saying that you don't want a good school, bad school mentality, but I mean, most parents are going to see the top score
Right.
and not understand that that's broken down into different weights, especially when we're dealing with headlines and stuff. I mean, is there any concern that, you know, like a 50, I mean, you know, even with kids, you talk about how grades can really define them and mess with them. Is there any concern that that will happen with schools?
Well, that is a concern, and that's something that we talk about in the issues that I think the Department of Education and education advocates and people out in the community really have to work hard to explain this to parents, businesses, community members, to really understand what does it mean to have a 65. Once we have data over time, what does it mean that a school is a 65, but 3 years ago they were a 37? That's actually pretty impressive. And so for them not to get labeled as a 65D school, but as one that is gaining like crazy and one that is probably doing some pretty great things that we need to look at. And so the communications around this is going to be really important, and that's something that we write about in this book, is that that's something we've got to pay attention to as a state. You have a question?
As an advocacy organization, what do you recommend parents do if they see a score that they're not happy with? I mean, so they're not happy, then what do they do?
I would recommend they join their PTA and they start getting involved in the school and try to figure out what is it that's going wrong, how can they help, what kind of resources do they need, and start joining and become much more involved in the school.
Okay, but let's say you figure out what the problem is. What can they do? I mean,
So there's
if you're
no
the
option
president
of
of the
leaving
PTA.
school, like No Child Left Behind, you're stuck at that school. Like you can't.
Well, Georgia has all sorts of schooling options. I mean, we have charter schools, and so there is choice in the state that if you're not happy with your school, you can leave.
Is there, I mean, does No Child Left Behind have the provision where you parent can transfer if their school district wasn't making AYP? Is that, and this is so in the weeds, but is there going to be something similar factored into this?
You know, that's something I would ask DOE. It's my understanding that the waiver really only applies to the accountability part of No Child Left Behind. I think the other parts of No Child Left Behind are still in play, but I would confirm that with DOE.
And Dr. Mike Block, our chief academic officer, is going to be here at lunchtime and after lunch to talk to you guys, so y'all can answer all these questions for you.
What will go into the financial efficiency rating? How will that be determined?
They're working now on those measures, and so I haven't seen them, so I don't really know what they look like. Yes?
And so as we look at their developing the weighting of these, what should we look for in terms of seeing whether we're creating a tough system to judge the schools?
You know, that's a great question, and I don't have an answer for you right now, but that's one that I actually would like to look at, and so I'll work on that and get back with you. Yes?
2 questions on those last 2 ratings there.
Yeah.
One, on financial efficiency. How can a school itself be fairly judged on financial efficiency when it's usually the district that determines where the dollars go and what schools get what resources? And 2 is on the school climate. Is that where the student survey component is, and how big of a weight does the student survey have in the school climate rating?
For the first one on financial efficiency, that's an excellent question, and when we get a look at the rubric, I think that's something that we as a state have to pay attention to and to look at that. I don't know the answer to that question. For the school climate rating, again, question for DOE, it's my understanding it is a survey, and so it's not a portion of something else, it's just the survey.
Student survey only, or other surveys, parent survey, teacher survey?
I think it's student survey. But again, neither of those ratings go into the calculation for the CCRPI. That's more informational purposes.
I just have a quick question. So, No Child Left Behind covering it forever, it seemed to me like a huge thing with no teeth, which is because it really only applies to Title I schools, and when you have a district with 2 Title I schools, yet we were still all under it. What is the penalties for not doing this? Are we still looking at majority Title I? What happens if you don't?
What do you mean don't?
What happens if you don't hit the score that the state needs? Or what happens, what's the penalty? No Child Left Behind had a first year, second year, all the way to 5th year where we do the whole change. What is the penalty of not?
Well, what happens is, this is separate. I mean, you'll get your public score, but also what happens here is if you stop making progress, no, the alert school here, and so if you see that there are issues in any school where they're on any kind of subgroup, either a demographic subgroup or just a whole math in general, their math scores aren't good, they're going to get alert flags here, and that's going to trigger intervention by the state.
Okay, so there is a punishment.
Yeah, I think more of interventions to help get better, but you could call it, but there are consequences, yes. Like they just won't be, oh, you're not doing well, we're not going to do anything about it. That's not part of this. And that's why this alert category is so important, because it does encompass all schools.
I'm really interested in the poverty number, and could you talk about how that may impact all the other pieces?
Yeah,
In terms of
let's
children's ability to improve.
let's skip to that. In the negative 5 minutes that I have left, as we said earlier, the poverty numbers in Georgia have really gone through the roof. And these are population statistics, not public school statistics, but you're looking at, if you look at this number over here, from the last census, we're up to about 26% of all of our children in the state are living in poverty. And then we have some counties in Georgia where that number is as high as 60%. Now looking at a different, you talked about measurements earlier, if you look at the K-12 population, our public school population, 60% of our children enrolled in public school qualify for free reduced price lunch. That's about a 10 percentage point increase since 2007. And so we've seen a huge increase in our public schools of children who are poorer and struggling. That's going to have a big impact on our public school system because of the resources that are required to help educate them and get them up to speed and keep them growing. We also have an increasingly diverse population from 2000 to 2010, and currently in our K-12 population, 56% of our students are non-white. And so we have a diverse, increasingly poor population that our schools are trying to educate. And these are just some of the recommendations and some of the things that we look at in the critical issues. One is the importance of early learning. We talked a little bit about that earlier, but the early learning investment of you get $4 back for every $1 that you spend. When you invest early learning in low income and minority students, that ratio actually rises to about 1 to 7. You actually get a bigger bang for your buck investing in early learning around low income kids. Also meeting the needs of English language learners. We have an increasing number of Hispanic students, but also an increasing number of just English language learners in general. And so schools need to look at, do we need bilingual teachers? We also probably need more professional development for all teachers, just around how to handle the increasing diversity in their classroom. Already talked about achievement by subgroup, and the new CCRPI does a really good job of tracking the subgroups and with their alert flags and things of that nature. But one of the things as a state I think we really need to look at too is increasing minority representation in the STEM fields. We already talked about how that's a growing economic field, and minorities and low-income populations have traditionally been underrepresented in these fields. And so those are a couple things that we need to address as a state. Overall, I'm really excited about the policies that Georgia has put in place in terms of education and where we're headed as a state, and we've already started to see some positive movement. And so I think we really need to keep our eye on the prize and keep moving forward, but we cannot lose sight of the details. And one of these details is the shifting demographics, because a lot of these reforms could get lost and really unseated if we don't pay attention to what does that demographic makeup look like, what do our students really need, what do our teachers need to address the changing needs of our students. It's now only -6, so any final questions? I will be around all day if you have more questions. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time.
Dr. Susan Andrews is the Deputy Superintendent for Race to the Top implementation and has recently moved into that role, but she certainly has a wealth of experience in the education arena, has a long history as an educator, so she will talk a bit more about what progress we're making in Race to the Top.
Thank you, Diane. It's a privilege to be here today. I've always admired the work of the Georgia Partnership, and it's great to be here because of the transparency that they deal with the issues on and their assistance to public education in giving us lots of information about what's going on in the public arena about public education. So it's great to be here today. And I want to talk about Race to the Top. And Dana, you did a great job talking about educational issues, and I appreciate your presentation because it gives us a good basis for this continued discussion. But I want to make sure that you understand that Georgia's educational initiatives were things that we already wanted to do prior to Race to the Top. We knew we needed to roll out Common Core. We knew that we needed a new teacher effectiveness measure and a way to strengthen what was going on in our classrooms. But in the current economic situation, we didn't have the funding to move forward. So Race to the Top is the funding source that allowed us to begin these initiatives and to get them kicked off. It was a competitive grant funded by the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. 11 states in the District of Columbia received the grant, and Georgia's award was $400 million. The scope of work in the grant lays out very specifically what the programs are that we will work on with this money. $200 million was kept at the state level to do the kinds of projects that you see here, implementing the Common Core, developing the teacher and leader effectiveness system, developing a longitudinal data system, looking at those early learning initiatives, looking at teacher certification revisions. And then $200 million were provided to the 26 partnering districts who said early on, yes, we know that we would like to be a partner in furthering this work. And so their scopes of work were funded by the other $200 million. Thank goodness we do not have to do this work alone. We have the partners, many partners in this work, and you can see the list of some of them here. And yesterday you probably saw that Education Week gave Georgia the first ever score of 100 on aligning education pre-K through university. And that's because of the partnerships that we have here. So we are really proud of those partnerships and how Georgia ranked on that study. These are our 26 partner districts that are colored in here. You can see we have small districts, large districts, urban districts, suburban districts, rural districts, and they're all over the state of Georgia working on this work. There are 4 major initiatives in Race to the Top: standards and assessment, data systems to support instruction, great teachers and leaders, and turning around lowest achieving schools. I'm going to go quickly through 3 of them because I think the one that I've been asked to speak most specifically about is the teacher and leader effectiveness system. I can tell you that to train you on teacher effectiveness system takes 3 days, and to train you on the leader keys takes 2 days, and I have 35 minutes. So you know that you're going to not just get a bird's eye view, but you will be getting a space shuttle view of these support systems. Under standards and assessment, the money that we receive from Race to the Top has allowed us to provide digital resources for teachers. They can find those straight on the DOE website, that we have been able to train teachers, bring teachers together from districts all over the state and help them develop units, because the way that we teach school is differently with common standards, with the Common Core standards, than the traditional curriculum that we had. We've partnered with GPTV. You heard the comments earlier about the webinars. Thousands of teachers have participated in those, and they were able to ask questions and find out about specific content that they teach. And so we've done a lot of things in implementing the Common Core through the Race to the Top grant. Georgia is also part of a 23-state consortium. You will hear it called PARC, but this is the consortium that's developing the common assessments for the Common Core that will be implemented in 2014-2015. Then you heard the discussion that Dana had about STEM. This initiative is dedicated to providing very high quality opportunities in the STEM fields, and GPTV is also our partner as we've created what we're calling shorts, but they're little science vignettes to assist students in understanding what science is all about, how exciting science is, and starting with very young children all the way through K-12 to make sure that we're getting that message out about what STEM job opportunities are out there. The longitudinal data system has 2 huge pieces. One is that it gives classroom teachers immediate data at the click of a mouse about their students' history, a 5-year history of their CRCT scores, their attendance records, and lots of different things that teachers need to know about students to inform their instruction as they're moving through the school year, plus summative data about their students. But the longitudinal data system also is part of a system that the University System of Georgia is working on, so that we have data from a time a child enters pre-K until they finish the university. We will also add Department of Labor statistics to that, so that we can see the economic impact of Georgia's public education system on the economics as we move forward.
Susan, do you know when we'll be there?
When we will be there?
Right, where we can see the broad view.
The P20 view? I don't know an exact date, but I can get that for you, and I will do that. They're working very hard on it. We had a long all-day meeting this week about that, so I know that it's coming quickly. These are just some dashboards that teachers will see, and I know it's difficult for you to see from there, but teachers will be able to see students' attendance records, and then district leaders can see how many of our students met the standard, didn't meet the standard, exceeded the standard. So you can just see a few slides of what teachers can see at the click of a mouse. The course standards right at their fingertips. And a teacher resource link. This link gives students access to high-quality digital resources, and it gives teachers professional development on the particular standard that they're working on. You heard the discussion about lowest achieving schools, our priority schools, our focus schools, and so the Office of School Turnaround was created to provide a very concentrated effort at the school level in order for those schools to implement one of 4 research-based reform efforts. So a school working with DOE would select the reform effort that they wanted to implement, and then they have a school improvement specialist there with them daily to work through turning that school around. There's ongoing monitoring, there's professional development, there's technical assistance at the individual school level. They assist schools in implementing more time for students, extending the school day, using data to inform instruction. So it's a very intense effort going on in these lowest achieving schools.
Susan, how was that original list compiled? What makes you a low performing school, since we haven't started this?
Those schools that were in the lowest 5% of achievement in the state and or had a graduation rate of less than 60%.
Based on CRCT?
Based on graduation test, based on, you know, we're talking high school, so you're talking about EOCTs and graduation tests, CRCTs in the elementary schools, the middle schools. Then we get to great teachers and leaders. You know, it would be great if we said, hey teachers, we have this new Common Core standards, go forth and teach. But it's not nearly that simple, because the way that we expect teachers to deliver that instruction is so different. We expect more authentic assessments. We expect more projects-based learning. We expect teachers to differentiate because of the difference in ability levels and achievement levels of their students. And so we have to train them to do this. This is a new way to teach school, actually. And we have our teacher preparation programs engaged in this work also, but we have all of those teachers in the field that we need to make sure they make that shift to teaching the Common Core standards. And so the teacher and leader effectiveness systems were developed and are in the process of being developed, and they contain these 4 elements: a quantitative measure of the value added to student achievement. So how does the student grow? How much does a student grow while they are in a teacher's classroom? Then teachers are rated on a group of standards. On the teacher keys, there are 10 standards, and I'm going to go into this in a little more detail in just a minute. But the teachers can receive a rating of exemplary, proficient, needs development, or ineffective. There are also student surveys, and this will result in a score for teachers. We call it a teacher effectiveness measure. And from that score, teachers will be provided bonuses under Race to the Top that we will pilot that, pay for performance for teachers. These are the components. These 3 major components here will generate a teacher effectiveness measure. So we'll start with this one right here, teacher assessment on performance standards. There are 10 standards that the teacher will be rated on. The principal will go in and observe 2 30-minute sessions. It can be announced or unannounced. The districts decide that. When the principal goes in to observe on those 2 sessions, that's part of the evaluation, and then there are 4 10-minute walkthroughs for each teacher, looking at maybe 1 or 2 standards on each of those walkthroughs. If the principal does not see that enough evidence when he goes in or she goes in to observe that teacher, then the teacher has an opportunity to provide documentation to the principal that he or she is meeting the standards. So you have this part, and we call it TAPS, Teacher Assessment on Performance Standards. You know we have to have acronyms in education. So this is the TAPS piece. That's the application of the standards with documentation. Then we have the student survey piece. This is for students in grades 3 through 12. The student surveys will inform the standards. It won't be a standalone score for the teacher, but it will inform the standard, the ratings on the standards. And then you have this huge piece here that we've never had before in teacher evaluation, student growth and academic achievement. This is the part where we will have the value added piece. How much does a student improve while he or she is in that teacher's classroom? If a teacher teaches a tested subject, and you know a lot of people will think, well, aren't they all tested? But we're talking about standardized tests, CRCT, EOCT. If a teacher teaches in a tested subject, then we will have a student growth percentile that says here's where that student scored on prior test, and here's where that student scored today. And we will compute the growth of that so that we are looking at how much the students actually are learning while they're in that teacher's classroom, and how much that teacher is able to reduce that achievement gap that's going on in that classroom. If you teach a non-tested subject, a subject that is not tested by one of our standardized tests, and that's 70% of the courses in a school in Georgia right now. You're talking about art, music, physical education, connections classes in middle schools, AP classes, IB classes. You're talking about all of those foreign language classes. So think about all of those that we don't test with a CRCT or an end of course test. The districts have their experts come together working with DOE to determine what are the super standards in those classrooms. What does a child need to know when they complete that course? And then they are developing pre and post test for those courses. You've heard them called student learning objectives. You may have heard them called SLOs. I don't really like to call them SLOs. I prefer to call them student learning objectives. And then that will be computed at the state level. So the teacher of those non-tested courses will receive a growth measure also. This is the timeline of the pilot and the implementation of teacher keys and leader keys, and I'll go over leader keys in just a minute. From January to May of this past year, we piloted the TAPS piece, the application of the standards to the teacher. And we've just received our preliminary report on that. It also included the student survey data. And when you do a pilot because you want to refine the process. If we had purchased an already validated evaluation system and placed it in our schools, we would have had no need to do a pilot. But we did the pilot because we're building this for Georgia's teachers by Georgia educators. And so the pilot gave us some really good information. We knew about some things that were going on during that pilot. We knew that it was only from January to May. We knew that it was only one piece of the evaluation system. We knew that we asked principals to also be evaluating teachers on the old instrument at the same time because this one wasn't yet validated. So you have principals evaluating teachers on an old binary system, which was satisfactory or unsatisfactory. So if you had a marginal teacher, that teacher in the old system would most likely get a satisfactory. And then you had this 4-point rating, exemplary, proficient, needs development, ineffective in the new system. And it created some dissonance because the principal would have to give the teacher a satisfactory on the old, and maybe that teacher was in needs development or ineffective on the new. So we may have seen some inflation of the ratings there. And we are beginning to talk to districts about That's kind of working itself out this year when they don't have the binary system. So that was our pilot information. Then right now, during 2012 and 13, we will use that TAPS part to inform human resources decisions this year. So now they're not having to do the dual systems. We will have the data for the value added, but this is our year of piloting that and seeing what that looks like and how that's going to be reflected in this instrument. So this year will be a hold harmless year for the value added measure. In 2013 and 14, we will have the TAPS portion, which includes the student surveys. We will have the value added impact, and from that we will generate that teacher effectiveness measure, which will again be used to make human resources decisions. Which teachers need professional development? What do they need professional development on? Which teachers are ineffective, and it's time for us to take some stronger measures there. And so in 13-14, we will have that whole piece. And then in 14-15, it will be fully implemented in the race to the top districts, and it will include that pay for performance piece based on that TIM score. Any questions before I leave teacher keys? And yes.
Race to the top, you mentioned 26 partner school districts, which includes, to my understanding, a little less than 40% of all students. Does those 60% of students that aren't in the race to the top district, what do they help? Is this not apply to them?
Now, the whole entire state is rolling out Common Core, so you got that piece. They have the longitudinal data piece. They have that piece. They have the lowest achieving schools piece. Now, we are allowing systems now to volunteer to come on board with teacher keys and leader keys, and we have several districts who have done that, and we're training them now. And the communication piece that's about to go out to all districts is y'all need to get on board and get this training while we have the staff paid for by Race to the Top to train districts. But all districts will be coming on board with this. This is to refine it, pilot it, get it in good shape before we roll it out to the whole state.
The performance money only goes to the 26 partner.
That's correct.
Okay.
Then we go to the Leader Keys Effectiveness System. Again, there are 3 components. I bet you can't guess what we call this. LAPS, since we call the teacher assessment TAPS. It has a governance and leadership piece and a student growth and academic achievement piece. These 3 components will generate a leader effectiveness measure. This instrument is for building level leadership, not district level leadership. Some districts have asked us about using it at the district level with their deputies and assistant superintendents, but this is a building level leadership piece. There are 8 standards that principals will be rated on. Again, they can receive exemplary, proficient, needs development, or ineffective. They must meet all 8 of those standards, but they also have to develop at least 2 goals that reflect those standards that are uniquely tied to their own school improvement plan. So that's what the performance goal setting piece here is. Under the governance and leadership, there are 3 parts. There will be a climate survey, and for principals, every teacher in the building and every staff member, cafeteria, food service worker, secretaries, parapros, custodians, will all complete a climate survey on the principal. The principal will select which groups will rate the assistant principal. So there will be that climate survey. Then we are looking at the rate of student attendance, because we believe that leadership can affect the rate that students come to school and how much they enjoy coming to school and their willingness to come to school. And then we will look at how effective principals are in retaining those effective educators, because we know that usually teachers leave leaders first. And so we want to see how effective they are at retaining those effective teachers. And then the student growth piece is just like we described in the teacher keys. You will have the student growth percentile on those tested subjects. You will have the district developed, DOE approved student learning objectives for non-tested subjects. We'll be looking at how quickly the achievement gap in that school between the bottom 25% and the rest of the students is being closed. and we will look at the growth measures there, the district identified growth measures. So now we have a teacher effectiveness measure and a leader effectiveness measure. So in review, teachers have to review. In review, Georgia has 4 main education initiatives. Standards and assessment, that's rolling out the Common Core. Longitudinal data system, that's both the P20 data system and the system that teachers have at their fingertips. Great teachers and leaders, that's the piece about the effectiveness system and turning around our lowest achieving schools. I want to make sure that we begin changing the conversation about race to the top, though. Race to the top is not driving the work. The work is driving race to the top. We knew that these were initiatives that we wanted to do, but we didn't have the money to do them. So race to the top is giving us the money to get these kicked off, piloted, and implemented and refined. We have many state partners. I cannot overemphasize the importance of the state partners. DECAL in working on the early learning piece, the importance of having the data for the universities to help inform the K-12 work as well as their own and teacher preparation. Professional Standards Commission is leading the work on a tiered teacher certification. Seismic is working on enhancing STEM preparation, and we have innovation grants that are allowing districts and universities to pilot and strengthen new initiatives. The Race to the Top goal on the first page of the grant says that our goal is to graduate students from high school, help them be successful in college and professional careers, be competitive with their peers throughout the world. Race to the Top is the funding source to help us get there. And now we have to begin the discussion about sustainability and how we will do that and how this work will become the norm in all of Georgia's schools. So that's going to be the greatest challenge of all, I think, is moving from the piloting, the implementation, the refining to the sustainability piece. And we're certainly ready to begin that, developing that plan. Yes?
How publicly available will these data be, these effectiveness measures?
Now, when it comes to teacher evaluation, there's confidentiality included in that, but you will see the school's effectiveness measure, a district's effectiveness measure, so there will be plenty of public documentation of those scores. There again, you know, you're talking about confidentiality of individual leaders. But I think you will have enough publicly to make some determinations and, you know, think about it in that way.
I thought DeKalb County is one of the counties in Race to the Top. Does the accreditation issue have any role in them losing any of the Race to the Top money?
In the Race to the Top money, you must complete your scope of work. So if you don't complete your scope of work, then you would jeopardize your Race to the Top funding. So those are two issues, the accreditation issues and the Race to the Top issue.
So if they lose accreditation, they don't lose Race to the Top money?
That's right, if they're fulfilling their scope of work.
On the teacher evaluations, and I guess this kind of goes back to the student performance too, is past data going to be factored into the current performance, or is it just going to sort of reset?
No, we're going to try to use at least 3 prior, let's take the tested subjects. We have CRCT data, so we can use up to 3 years of prior data if we have it. There will be some instances like 3rd grade, there is no prior data, so 3rd grade has to use the student learning objectives, even though there's a CRCT there. 4th grade, we would have 1 year of prior data. So, but we would like to use 3 or 4 years of prior data. With 9th grade end of course test, we will go back to an 8th grade CRCT as the prior data. Say if you're taking Algebra 1 in 9th grade, we'll look at your 8th grade CRCT and your 7th grade CRCT in math as your prior, so that we get a measure of where you have been performing. Because students are going to be compared to their academic peers. Who scored like me? And now how much growth have we made?
What about teacher evaluations?
Clarify.
In other words, if you had evaluations under the old system, will those factor into the new evaluation system, or will they just basically start from scratch?
I think that you have to take some of that information into consideration, but like I said, this is a whole shift in how we do business. So yes, I was satisfactory under the old one, but the expectation is now I have to meet these standards, and I have to meet them at the proficient level or the exemplary level. So, you know, you can't just do away with 10 years of teacher effectiveness. You have to give teachers time to get up to speed on the new evaluation instrument. But the new instrument is going to be the one that we're going to use to make human resources decisions. Yes?
Do you have any idea what kind of money you're looking at for sustainability and when you'll approach legislators? What kind of timetable are you on?
That's the work that we are beginning to do now. Of course, anytime you get a grant, you should start on day one looking at sustainability of the initiatives. But we were so busy doing the work that now we know, okay, we're 18 months out, we have to develop that plan. And what we're looking at is, okay, what will be the role of the individual school in sustainability, the district in sustainability, our regional education agencies, and DOE, and how much will that cost at each level to sustain this work? And so we are beginning to pull some of that together and begin thinking in that way so that we will have that information. And we have to look at it, you know, not just 1 year out, but 2 years out, 3 years out, 4 years out.
Do you have a timetable for knowing when you'll be ready to share that?
Yesterday, I wished we had finished it, but we haven't. So no, I don't have a timetable.
I'm looking at an hour and 40 minutes of in-classroom observation in a 180-day year. And I actually served as a principal for a day with my principal, and we went in on one of these observations. And in 30 minutes, I'm amazed that you could get anything. You know, if you walk in and the kids are working on a small group activity, you sit there and you watch that for 30 minutes. And so I'm just kind of curious, is that enough, or is that just checking a box to say, yes, we did it?
No, it's not. We're looking at the preponderance of an evidence. When you live in a school with a group of teachers for 180 days, you're not just going in for those 2 30-minute times or those 4 10 minutes. That's the formal piece of it. But you're stepping in and out of those classrooms all the time. You're looking at teacher lesson plans. You're looking at student formative data as it comes across your desk as the principal. So this is the formal piece, but we're going to look at the totality of the evidence. That's how we're training our principals. You're looking at this overall picture of the teacher. And when you go in, and we've done a lot of inter-rater reliability, and that's something that's going on right now. Our education specialists are going into a school, sitting down with a principal, rating a teacher, and then looking to see how valid their scores are and making sure that our inter-rater reliability is strong. But you know more than that 2 30-minute sessions. And the teacher has an opportunity to provide documentation if you go in and say, you know, I didn't see anything about this standard. Well, here's a document that shows that I've differentiated, that I've used data to inform my instruction. Yes.
Following up on that question, you know, Gates released its final report this week on how to do these things the best way. And of course, they recommend not just in-house observations, but an outsider coming in to address the issue of bias, which seems, given Nancy's story earlier in the week, that you basically had almost all your teachers again, you know, showing proficiency, the same as the old system. Have you considered that? And the second thing is technology. The Gates report really recommends, because of the time constraints, and the fact that I think Herb's probably going to tell us later that principals will be hard-pressed to do this. I had thought about video, which is what Gates ended up doing. They ended up taping these teachers and then bringing them in for experts to see. It just seems like the in-school evaluation, observation part of this is going to be very difficult based on what teachers and principals are telling me. Some teachers claim they weren't really evaluated even in the pilot to the extent that they were supposed to be.
Well, our expectation is that, number one, a principal's number one goal every single day is to keep those people in that building as safe as possible. That's number one, no matter what. Number two is to make sure that they are looking at the instructional environment. And so that is their top priority outside of the safety, is to make sure that they're managing that instructional program, that viable curriculum is being implemented. So that too is a culture shift. Okay, principals, your number one job is to make sure that we are implementing these Common Core standards with fidelity. Now, if you've ever been a principal, and I see you standing here, Diane, if you've ever been a principal, you know that you can have your whole day planned perfectly and something can go wrong at 7 a.m. that ruins your plan. So it's going to have to become a priority, and we haven't talked about videos and we haven't talked about outsiders going in, but we hope that we can refine some of that during this pilot. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susan. A lot of details to absorb this early in the morning. So we're going to take about a 10-minute break, be back in this room at 5 minutes after 11. The restrooms are outside the door. I think you'll see the sign on the door. Refreshments in the back room. So go ahead and take your break, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.